The High Court's rejection of the so-called Malaysian solution is both a policy and a political blow for the Gillard Government. But it's the political hit that might prove fatal. Government ministers privately admit the electorate questioned Labor's competence before this decision. As National Affairs editor Heather Ewart reports, some now believe there's no coming back from here.
It began with such promise on the 24th of June last year. Australia's first female Prime Minister was supposed to cure Labor's ills and save it from the electoral defeat many MPs felt was guaranteed under Kevin Rudd.
I want to make firstly a commitment that I will lead a strong and responsible government that will take control of our future.
14 months on after the High Court ruling torpedoing the government's Malaysia solution, it's come to this.
Well, let's be clear about what's happened here. The High Court yesterday took a decision that has effectively changed refugee and asylum seeker law in this country.
The easy option would be to resign. The only thing that would happen if I resigned would be my quality of life might go up, but nothing else is going to be impacted by that. I have a job to do and I intend to continue to do it.
As far as I'm concerned, the government is dead. What we have to ensure that the Parliament can get some decent legislation up and fix the particular issues that are in front of it at the moment.
We've never seen a political party, a major political party, in this sort of trouble, so we don't really know whether there's any crawling back, but it looks next to impossible.
Talk to anyone in Labor ranks today, including senior levels of government, and behind the scenes they're all saying the same thing, that the High Court decision is diabolical for Labor, compounding a now entrenched public perception of government incompetence.
They're distraught. I mean, if they're obviously slitting their wrists or drowning their sorrows. They don't know what to do.
I think they'd be a bit shell-shocked over the determination. But if they breathed in a bit and looked at it, they'd say, well, these are our democratic processes at work.
The government's in a terrible mess, and it does require some leadership to get out of it, and that's the one thing Julia Gillard has not provided in the last 12 months.
Is it too late for her?
Oh, yeah, way too late. There's no way she can turn this around. And, you know, you've got to say it gets worse for her every single day. Never gets better, just gets worse.
But isn't this damaging the country, not just the Labor Party? Isn't this damaging the country?
They just can't seem to sort of do three things right in a row. They can't seem to get their message across to the public. And the political mistakes, when they're made, they're not learnt.
Many MPs and ministers, past and present, I spoke to today, are assuming electoral disaster. In the words of one power broker from the Hawke era, the next election could be a greater landslide against us than the Whitlam defeat in 1975. Another party heavyweight has seen internal Labor polling in the past month and says it's worse than diabolical in every state. And that was before the High Court decision. The opinion polls are now consistently putting Labor's primary vote in the 20 to 30% range.
Once you get down to that, you're sort of reduced to sort of friends and family really supporting you. You haven't got a wider public support there at all, and it suggests that it really is the most rusted on Labor supporters who are sticking with them.
I think most of us in the building should do what the Australian people want, to get on with this term of Parliament. There's too much preoccupation about what's going to happen at the next election. It's all about polls for the next election. If there was an election tomorrow, what would happen?
Maybe the greatest problem for Labor is that outlined on this program by former Prime Minister John Howard at the start of the week. It was widely quoted in conversations today by political figures on both sides.
The biggest problem that the current Prime Minister has is that she lacks authority. And even if you are an unpopular Prime Minister, and I went through periods of unpopularity, all of us do as Prime Ministers, you have to retain authority.
I think there are some very good individuals in the government, but there's a strange culture in this government which started with Kevin Rudd and was intensified with Prime Minister Gillard. They just don't know what they want to do. And if you don't know what you want to do, you'll never achieve it.
As the government this afternoon rolled out its national broadband network in Townsville, the first Queensland site for the NBN, it was the one positive note in troubled times. Over the past few weeks, the government has been battling the credit card scandal surrounding Labor MP Craig Thomson. For weeks before that, it was trying to sell its carbon tax, and all while its border protection policies were unravelling with the High Court challenge.
Labor should have seen this coming because they're always outfoxing themselves. They knew the only way to stop boat people was to have the sort of dual solution that Prime Minister Howard had. And they were trying to stop the boats with one arm tied behind their backs. And guess what? It hasn't worked.
To say that the Parliament is in some degree of paralysis is quite incorrect in my view. I think the Parliament is actually working quite well.
If the government can just sort out the mess it's in at the moment, get a bit of oxygen and really start to market these other policies which I think are fundamentally good, I think the government could survive the next election.
But it was never this bad, as Labor knows full well, during the Hawke-Keating era, and some who worked in it lament that the latest generation of Labor MPs don't operate the same way.
When Bob Hawke was in power and there were problems, political problems that the government came up across against and policy problems, people would work together and sort through them, and people were honest enough to be frank with one another. I'm not sure that that's going on at the moment.
What is going on is the Treasurer having to deal with questions like this.
High school, I think.
How safe is Julia Gillard's leadership?
Absolutely.
And do you expect... Sorry?
Absolutely.
Mr Swan, do you agree that the Labor Party has a credibility problem in Queensland?
Not at all. I don't accept that for 1 second.
It's another 2 years till election day, unless something happens to change that. And right now, Labor can only hope for signs of improvement on the horizon.
Heather Hewitt reporting.